Hello and welcome to another video by Rick Miracle, me, in my series Freemasonry and Satanism. I've been reading this book for the past few days and thought it was about time I make a video on it. Operation Mind Control. Couldn't find it to purchase, but I did find it free PDF on the internet. Written by Walter Bowart. Now think about that. Can the powers that be mind control us? Is there an agenda for a global world order? Are they preparing for martial law or World War III or some fake false flag disaster? Project Bluebeam, aliens coming, or maybe crashing the dollar or the economy or some pandemic, biological weapons, electromagnetic weapons. Maybe they'll say they ran out of oil and the whole world has to change how it behaves. I don't know. But are they mind controlling people now? And what are the different methods of mind control? There's subtle mind control. When the communists claimed in the 1920s and the 1930s, when they testified before Congress in the USA, that they were going to infiltrate the school systems, the churches, the medical system, every aspect of our way of life. And they were bent on this global world order, this new world order that even George Bush Sr. mentioned on September 11th, 1986, not 2001. And he said, out of chaos and anarchy will come the new world order. So are they bringing us that chaos and that anarchy? And again, can they mind control us? And what kind of techniques do they have? I can think of a few. The subtle mind control, the teaching, the changing of behavior, and willing to do it over the course of a couple generations. Like they talked about in the 20s and the 30s. They've had several generations of young people to indoctrinate into this new age thinking. Yes? No? What do you think? And like I like to say, are you thinking? Is this stuff important? So I'll read from the back of the book before I start on a particular chapter that I found kind of interesting. Different kinds of mind control. Hypnotism, drugs, subtles, training, social communications, newspapers, magazines, TV, movies. Operation Mind Control, the CIA. The making and unmaking of a killer. Can they mind control people to be killers? Have they been doing it? Are there assassins everywhere? This is the most terrifying true story ever to emerge from the United States. Walter Bowart has uncovered a huge government cryptocracy. So that's not the elected officials. We have crypto means it's fake, hidden, cryptocracy. Dedicated to controlling and manipulating human minds. Through hypnosis, drugs, ordinary citizens become CIA zombies. Human computers, spies, trained assassins, with no control over or consciousness of their actions. They know not what they do in many cases. How many school shooters, movie theater shooters, and Boston Marathon shooters, and bombers. How do we know if this isn't some big prepared false flag and events just to make us believe something, which is mind control? Only unexplained memory gaps or a separate personality which emerge on a trigger cue. So these people can be triggered when they're hypnotized to do things on cue. Showed the victim that something was amiss. Bowart's devastating account include top-secret documents, cold-bloodedly outlining the cryptocracy's program, and startling new evidence to link Lee Harvey Oswald, James Earl Ray, Sirhan with Operation Mind Control, assassination of President John Kennedy. In The Manchurian Candidate, it was fiction. Here it is a chilling fact. So apparently this book was published in 1978. Operation Mind Control, a magnificent book, moral, significant, and unforgettable, and I've been reading it for the past couple days. And if this was a book on fiction, a story made up like a sci-fi novel or a horror novel or something, it would be an interesting story. It's fascinating. But regrettably, apparently it's true, so that certainly makes it concerning and a clear and present threat to our reality. A horrible situation if they're doing it, and with the technologies they have today, a combination of trances by words, which can be induced into people by electromagnetic waves, you'll think you're hearing your own voice, but it could be a hypnotist with quite extreme powers. So when he speaks to you, and you can't see it, all you can do is hear it, and a combination of drugs. Maybe they could put some of these chemicals in the water supply or food. What can they do with this coming 5G, microwave, and other frequencies system coming online, and the HARP transmitters, wireless transmitters, artificial intelligence software programs? How far will they go? How far have they gone? So I've been reading this. Like I said, I couldn't find it for sale, but I did find it free PDF online. You can find it. If you can print it out, I think you'll be as fascinated as I was. Operation Mind Control. Walter Bowart was born in Omaha, Nebraska in 1939. He was awarded a McMahon Journalist Scholarship to the University of Oklahoma and has since worked as an editor, publisher, and a writer. His articles have appeared in many journals, including the East Village Other, the underground newspaper which he founded in 1965. So no cars pass by here for the last hour. I sit down and a lot of traffic. Walter Bowart lives in Tucson, Arizona with his wife and 3 children. I like to look into these details when I read these books and see, who is this person? What have they done? Alright, so there's a lot of dedications here to a lot of people who assisted him. Alright, it says here, I know of no safe depository of the ultimate powers of society, but the people themselves. So we the people need to be taking charge of our society, and I can tell you now, and I guess I probably don't have to, we don't have any control over what goes on in our society right now. There are secret powers behind the scenes, a crypto government, a cryptocracy, making decisions and exercising all kinds of events, Jade Helm 15 in 2015, and bringing us false flags and Even President Donald Trump participating in the growth of Israel by saying the United States recognizes Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, something they've been fighting for hundreds of years. It's no small thing, I keep saying. 9/11, World War I, World War II, French Revolution, the war between the North and the South, the United States, taking over the Federal Reserve, owned by private individuals, the Illuminati, Rothschilds, Schiffs, Morgans, and other people, controlling the USA money supply. You don't think that's a precarious situation to be in? Imagine how much money they have fleeced from this country since 1913, bringing us world wars 6 months later after they took control of the Federal Reserve, or created it, with the assistance of their elected president, Woodrow Wilson. It's common knowledge. They tried to get President Taft, to go along before Wilson, but he would not go along, and neither would a lot of senators or representatives. So these elite people, Illuminati, some elite Jewish people in New York and the rest of the world, said, okay, we'll put our man in office. We have the power, we have the money. And then they create the Federal Reserve. Then they start World War I 6 months later. You think this is all a coincidence? And if we think them not enlightened enough to exercise their control, so if we don't think that we the people have enough smarts to control, with a wholesome discretion, the remedy is not to take it from them, but to inform their discretion by education. That's Thomas Jefferson. So if we people don't know what to do and how to do it, we need to get educated, and in my opinion, hopefully it's not too late. Authors note this book is an exercise in citizens' intelligence. The author and the majority of those who've contributed to it are private citizens working on their own in a synergistic effort, without major funding or corporate support, without government privilege or need to know, other than the need cited by Jefferson, the need for informed discretion in a democracy. Without the help of these many people, who, like the author, were motivated by shock and outrage that citizens have been so victimized by their own government, this book would not have been undertaken. Operation Mind Control. The CIA's plot against America. Is this guy telling the truth? Published this book in 1978. He spent years researching this material with the assistance of intelligent people all over the world. He has a long list of their names here. I can't see with the sun glaring. But maybe you can pause your computer if you want to see them, or go online and find the PDF. The table of contents. The Cryptorian candidate. So can they put people in office that are one of them? And it looks like they did with President Donald Trump. But if Hillary Clinton would have won, she is one of them. There seems to be little doubt. Even with President Donald Trump announcing the USA recognizes Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. That's no small thing. Right after he sent 89 missiles towards Syria, and the mother of all bombs dropped on Afghanistan, nothing changed. And apparently the stock market is booming, the housing market is booming, and the economy is robust. Things are going great. Is everybody being set up for a fall? Is it part of mind control? Letting our guard down. Only one mind for my country, the mind laundry myth, without knowledge or consent. Some of the table of contents in this book. pain drug hypnosis, the guinea pig army, the MK Ultrians, MK Ultra. Go look that up if you don't know what that is. And if you, while you're at it, go look up Project Montauk and many other programs. The Basis series with Miles Johnston, they find people who are seeking help because they have hypnotic suggestions and they don't know why their lives are confusing. So they go see a psychiatrist or a psychologist, and somehow they get into the system. And Miles Johnson has been debriefing and interviewing some of these people. And under hypnosis or other tools, they have uncovered some horrific things that have happened to them. Even made to kill people. And much worse, if that can be possible. The Mata Hari of mind control, the slaves who buried the Pharaoh, Brave New World in a Skinner box, the School for Assassins, the Four Faces of a Zombie, the Lone Nuts, the Ignored Confessions, another Hypnopatsy, Confessions by Automatic Writing, the Patriotic Assassin, Deep Probe, From Bionic Woman to Stimulated Cat, the Engines of Security. So as you can see here, I've been reading and reading. This is my PDF printout. And I came across some material here that I said, I think this is the chapter I'll talk about. Chapter 4, Without Knowledge or Consent. So here we go. I can hypnotize a man without his knowledge or consent into committing treason against the United States. This was boasted by George Estabrooks in the early 1940s. Estabrooks, chairman of the Department of Psychology at Colgate University, was called to Washington by the War Department shortly after Pearl Harbor. Since he was a ranking authority on hypnotism, at the time they wanted his opinion on how the enemy might be planning to use hypnotism. 200 trained foreign operators working in the United States, Estabrooks told the military leaders, could develop a uniquely dangerous army of hypnotically controlled sixth columnist. So you put 200 hypnotists, locate them strategically around the United States, set them up as a therapist or whatever, where they get to meet people in the privacy of a office, whatever. Hypnotize them, program them, send them back to work. See them once a week or once a month, strengthen the program. How many people could one person do in a month? 20? 100? 200 people times 100? And they wouldn't be just normal people programmed. Upon the trigger, and who knows what that trigger would be? Something like World War III or some kind of key thing happening, and they would be vicious killers everywhere. Is that possible? Go get this book and then you make up your mind. Do some homework. At that time, only a handful of men knew of the government's experiments in hypnosis for the purpose of controlling minds in the interest of national security. Oh my. In that decade, there had been no concentrated assassinations of presidents, candidates, or civil rights leaders. So prior to 1940s, we didn't have Martin Luther King assassinated. We didn't have President John Kennedy assassinated, and so many others since then. There had not been a Watergate, nor any disclosures of government agencies invading the privacy of United States citizens. The CIA had not yet been conceived. And even its parent, the Office of Strategic Services, the OSS, did not exist. Well, those were the good old times when you probably could count on your elected official, whether it's your local mayor or state senator or governor or president or representative. Not anymore. It was unthinkable at the time that an agency of the United States government would employ mind control techniques on its own people. Therefore, it was natural for George Easterbrook to believe that if every American were threatened by hypnotic mind control, the threat would be posed by a foreign enemy working within the United States. And I believe all that is turned around now, like with Jade Helm 15 and all the false flags, and the installation of the 5G cell phone system and wireless systems, and all the other improvements of these technologies since MK Ultra or Project Montauk, and many other black operations, secret laboratories, testing these things. There's many whistleblowers. You can go check it out online. Many whistleblowers escaping from these secret societies, the Freemasons or the Illuminati or other organizations, or working for the government. Lots of persecution, prosecution, even assassination of these whistleblowers. So in 1943, Easterbrook sounded his public alarm. Next page. And planted the seed for what would become priority top secret research for the next 25 years. So right after World War II, or during it, what year was that? (1943), so that would have been right in the middle of World War II. The government spent the next 25 years perfecting it, and that would be Project Montauk or MK Ultra and many other programs. And go look up Miles Johnston, the Basis series, see some of the people that he's interviewing who are telling horrific stories, and there are many others. And with these technologies coming online, computers, facial recognition, I don't have to say all this. Most people are aware this is all going on. These systems are coming online. Even me with getting a new driver's license. It said I have to fill out some more forms to qualify for a federal ID. I opted out. And then when they changed my street address, because I was a branch on a street, they sent us a letter and said, we're going to change the name of your street. So I had to go change my driver's license again. And they were more emphatic about me clicking the option that my driver's license become a federal ID. And it reminds me of Germany. Papers, please. Papers, please. But I still opted out. I do have a passport, so if it comes to that, I'll have to carry my driver's license and my passport. But these things are happening. Even 2012, 2013, I think it was 2013, I was having lunch with a couple friends of mine, and I mentioned a little bit of my research and my concern that I had discovered online in 2013 that they were microchipping children in California and Texas. It was in the press. And one of the girls sitting at the table said, I don't know what your problem is, Rick, and this was in Florida. She said, my husband is with the Veterans of Foreign Affairs, or the VFW, Foreign Wars. And on weekends, they're having people bring in their children every weekend, and they're microchipping them here in Florida. I was shocked. 2013. So with all these electronic systems and their improved expertise in putting people in a trance, and if you're difficult to be put into a trance, they have drugs now, it'll be in this material, that they can give you that'll make you susceptible to go into a trance. And once they get you in a trance, they'll program you so that it's easy to put you in another trance without the drugs. So once they get you under and they set a program in place, and most people, probably I guess all, are intended to not know they have been programmed with certain things to do when they're triggered. Couching his disclosure in hypothetical terms and saying that the hypnotized mind could be put to military use, he then portrayed a scene where he said could very easily take place. It would be possible, he said, for the enemy to plant a foreign agent as a doctor in a hospital or his own office. This doctor could, by means of fake physical examination, place thousands of people under his power over a period of time. Esther Brooks projected how, by hypnotizing key officers, programming them to follow suggestions, this masked maneuver could enable a lowly first lieutenant to take the reins of the entire U.S. Army. Wow, can you imagine if a captain commander of a nuclear submarine was on vacation and he was caught off guard, something slipped into his drink while under the influence of the drug? Maybe they slipped it in his alcohol, he was having a good time. He gets hypnotized, then when he wakes up, he doesn't remember a thing, but he's programmed. He goes back to the submarine, and then on some trigger point, he does what he's programmed to do. There's probably movies about this stuff. His alternative scenario depicted by the general staff summoning a colonel from intelligence to an emergency meeting in the Pentagon 2 days after an outbreak of war. Shortly after entering the room, these are some situations that could arise with hypnotism. Shortly after entering the room where Pentagon brain trusters were gathered, the colonel was put into a hypnotic trance by the Army psychologists and told there has been a change of plans for the defense of a major territory. The details of the plan have to be conveyed in absolute secrecy to the Pacific Command. Since the enemy has been very successful in monitoring U.S. communications, a new highly reliable procedure is needed to slip the message past the enemy. The colonel, under the influence of hypnosis, will carry the top secret message. When you wake up, the hypnotized colonel is told, you will no longer have the slightest knowledge of the secret information carried in the lower layers of your mind. The colonel is then given the instructions to proceed by airplane to Honolulu. He is told that in his normal waking state he will hold the impression that he is on a routine mission and must report upon his arrival to General Y. He is the only man in the world who can hypnotize you again. Put to sleep by General Y and only him. You will correctly recall all the details of this conversation and disclose the secret instructions we have just given you. So can they do that with hypnotism? All right, moving on. Esther Brooks said later he had given the Pentagon episode only as a practical example of how a new science of hypnotism could be used for military purposes. Going even further with his alarming predictions, Esther Brooks told how disguised techniques of hypnotism could be employed to create an entire army of saboteurs within our country. Let us suppose that in a certain city there lives a group of given foreign extraction. They are loyal Americans, but still have cultural and sentimental ties to the old country. A neighborhood doctor working secretly for a foreign power hypnotizes those of his patients who have ties favorable to his plans. And as we already know, like I said, President Donald Trump has certainly helped the state of Israel make a giant leap forward in fulfillment of a prophecy, and even with the Freemasons building all those design plans for King Solomon's temple, we can see there are some groups that exist that could be part of these people that might be agreeable to be programmed or susceptible to be programmed. Having done this, he would, of course, remove from them all knowledge of ever having been hypnotized. And if somebody wanted to use people from the Middle East, Arabs, and a lot of them might have some resentment of having been forced from their countries in the Middle East and coming here to the United States or Europe, living in a foreign land, maybe they would be agreeable and susceptible to being programmed entities to be triggered on command. Remember the Hegelian dialectic, the divide and conquer tactic used for thousands of years. They want all the people killing each other while they watch. Awareness is the key. Waking up is a key, as Thomas Jefferson said in the front of this book. Next comes a 1-month period of indoctrination under hypnosis by various means, including the offer of substantial rewards and educational processes designed to strengthen their ancestral loyalties. Their cooperation is obtained. Estabrooks explained how individuals so controlled would have no conscious aversion to Americans and would continue to behave as good citizens. Subconsciously, however, they would be saboteurs and agents of the enemy. All right, you say, this sounds beautiful on paper. But what about the well-known psychological principle that no one do anything under hypnosis that he wouldn't do when he's awake? Estabrooks added. So they would like you to believe things. They would like us to believe a lot of things they say. Even Google saying they don't influence politics. It's come out in the news numerous times. Facebook doesn't monitor and use that information for many purposes and selling that information. But anyways, Facebook or Google, they just make a press release and say, no, we would never do that. And so many gullible people believe that. It just kills me. Of course they're doing it. They say they're doing it. You can see they're doing it. Go on your computer, try to look up purchasing a riding lawnmower and see how fast you start getting commercials every time you go to your computer. Probably get stuff in the mail. Say something on the phone and see if you can get it to trigger on your computer. My experiments have shown this assumption is poppycock. So the fact that people can't be programmed to do things against their will, against this leader of the Psychiatric Association, he says that's poppycock. I'll believe him. He's the leader in his field. The government called him for advice. He must know what he's talking about. It depends not so much on the attitude of the subject as on the operator himself. So not all hypnotists are created the same. Some of them have much more control over people than others. In wartime, the motivation for murder under hypnosis doesn't have to be very strong, Estabrooks warned. During World War I, a leading psychologist made a startling proposal to the Navy. He offered to take a submarine steered by a captured U-boat captain, placed under his hypnotic control, through enemy minefields to attack the German fleet. Washington nixed the strategy as too risky. First, because there was no disguised method which the captain's mind could be outflanked. Second, because the today's techniques of day-to-day breaking down of ethical conflicts, brainwashing was still unknown. The indirect approach to hypnotism would, I believe, change the Navy's answer today. Personally, Esther Brooks concluded, I am convinced that hypnosis is a bristling, dangerous armament which makes it doubly imperative to avoid the war of tomorrow. George Estabrooks may have greatly contributed to the U.S. government's interest in hypnosis, for during the years that followed, seeking ways both to improve the mind. Got to go to the next page, but I wrote down some words here. Project Montauk that came to my mind, MK Ultra, the Basis series, Miles Johnson, and so much more, the Manchurian Candidate. I remember watching some children watch cartoons probably 20 years ago, and I was stunned that they were 6 and 7 years old at my sister's house. And little Nancy Bear asked Sally Bear who she was going out with this weekend. And Sally Bear says, well, I'm going out with Bobby Bear. These are cartoon characters. And Nancy Bear said, you can't go out with Bobby Bear. You got to make a choice. Last year weekend, you went out with Susie Bear. You can't date a boy and then a girl and then a boy. And Sally Bear said, yes, I can. I can date anybody anytime I want. So they were programming those children. And how much further has that gone? There's plenty of evidence out there. They're even showing sexually oriented films to children in grade school and so much more. Most people are aware of all this. And it does go off in many other directions, as we all know now, with the homosexual agenda, even the pansexual agenda or bisexual agenda, sex with anything or sex with either sex or both sexes at the same time. These people are calling Christians haters because in the Bible, of course, it says that homosexuality is abhorrent. That's what God says. So they're demonizing Christianity, and people are believing it. People have been mind controlled. They're adamant about that. There's no arguing with them, discussing it with them. They're sold. They're programmed. It's over. And that's just one simple aspect. The New Age, globalism. People will fight against nationalism. They know not what they do. So, and to control it, various government agencies, many of them with intelligent functions, secretly pursued research in hypnotic techniques. So countries all over the world are involved on this. And from my research, even Prime Minister Sharon of Israel said it, and you can look it up, in an argument in his Congress in Israel. Don't worry about America. We control America, and the Americans know it. And apparently it was Israeli security companies that were in charge of the security at the airports involved in 9/11. And apparently it is Israel today that is a leader in internet security. They have 12 of the largest companies in the world based out of Israel, etc. And they're the ones who are behind the Zionism and books called The Jewish Utopia. So they have access to all these technologies, and they have huge financial investments and resources all over the world. And there are plans, they're microchipping children. So I would assume this facial recognition deployed all over China, and even in, what did I say, a week ago? In California at the train stations when you get up to go to work in the morning or home. Probably bus stations, sidewalks. And that's LA. Pretty soon it'll be every city, beast computers, Wi-Fi, 5G network, smart meters, smart cameras, smart cards, smart credit cards, smart televisions, iPads, all under artificial intelligence. They will have tagged all of us. They will know everything we do, everything we say, And they even have technologies, apparently, for mind control. Puts a whole new perspective on this conversation. A number of related events during the 1940s demonstrated the extent of the government's interest in hypnosis. Beyond changing beliefs, they sought ways to motivate people to commit acts they would not commit in a normal state. And remember, after World War II, they did bring us the hippie age, as it was called, with the music and the marketing and the LSD and heroin and marijuana and reds and speeds, acid, all that stuff, mescaline. And over in Europe, they called it festivals. They were mind controlling the masses of the young people, using political situations, the Vietnam War. Everybody was susceptible. Everybody was engrossed in TV, watching Bewitched, or I Dream of Jeannie, Hogan's Heroes, Star Wars, Lost in Space, Star Trek. The last 50, 60 years have been very interesting. People are being mind controlled. They're being taught a new view or perception of reality. Channeled material from channelers. Apparently, galactic diplomacy, UFO alien books, Sirius Project, Disclosure Project. They're trying to get us all to see things from a different point of view. The question is, what's the purpose? What's the truth? Dr. Bernard Ginges wrote of an amnesia experiment he undertook for the U.S. Army in the late 40s. A soldier with only grade school education was able to memorize an entire page of Shakespeare's Hamlet after listening to the passage several times. Upon awakening, he could not recall any of the lines, and even more startling was the fact that he had no remembrance of the hypnotic experience. A week later, he was hypnotized again. In this state, he was able to repeat the entire page without a single error. So they can program our minds. In another experiment to test the validity of increased memory retention, 5 soldiers were hypnotized en masse and given a jumbled code consisting of 25 words without phonic consistency. They were allowed 60 seconds to commit the list to memory. In a waking state, each man was asked to repeat the code, and none of them could. One man hazily remembered having had some association with the code, but could not remember more than that. The other 4 soldiers were allowed to study the code consciously for another 60 seconds, but all denied previous acquaintance with it. So under hypnosis, they were given these 25 words, a list to remember. When they woke up, they couldn't remember the words at all, even when looking at a list. During rehypnotizations, when they were rehypnotized, they were individually able to recall the exact content of the coded message. What do you think? In 1947, J.G. Watkins induced criminal behavior in deeply hypnotized subjects during an Army experiment. Watkins suggested a distorted view of reality to his subjects by inducing hallucinations which allowed them to avoid direct conflict with their own moral concepts. So he hypnotized them and they would commit crimes, even if they were morally decent people, God-fearing people, religious people. He carefully chose his suggestions to be in line with his subjects' pre-existing motivational structures, and so was able to induce so-called antisocial behavior. So think about that. The drugs that are being delivered to people every day. So we have epidemics. in many cities. I forget what that new drug was. Opoids. And then, of course, your city streets, people have daggers and dragons and demon tattoos and dress up to look like freaks. You suppose they would be candidates to be programmed? Watkins took a normal, healthy Army private, a young man whose test indicated a most stable personality, and put him in a deep trance. Though merely striking a superior officer is a court-martial offense in the Army, Watkins wanted to see if he could get his subject to strangle a high-ranking officer. So here he is, a private. He's being hypnotized, and the hypnotist is going to tell him to strangle a high-ranking officer. After the subject was deep into trance, Watkins told him that the officer sitting across from him was a Japanese soldier who was trying to kill him. He must kill or be killed. Watkins suggested, and immediately the private leapt ferociously at the officer and grabbed him by the throat. So what could a hypnotized person do? What can these electromagnetic frequencies do, mind control frequencies do, that they can implant voices in people's heads? That's knowledge you can look up. So if they can put voices in people's heads, if they can get a hypnotist to put voices in people's heads, and if the people, the citizens, were resistant, which apparently some people are, if they assist that programming or capability of putting the person in a trance with some kind of drug, maybe they put in a water supply or served in some restaurant, somehow got some drugs into the person, or even a whole city of people, could they hypnotize a lot of people en masse? Apparently, according to what I read here, if they did that, about 90% of the people would be affected. Which is interesting because my research has disclosed that about 85% of the people are asleep or oblivious of what's going on. Only plus or minus 15% are awake. So you have to wonder, has there been some subtle mind-controlled, trance-induced programming going on for quite a while? Because I can stand next to a person and say, do you see those jets dumping out chemicals? And they'll look up, or they'll refuse to look up and get angry, and they'll go, no, I don't see anything. And it is quite bizarre that they can't even see it or won't acknowledge it. Don't even try talking to them about the cell phone towers and microwaves and associate the microwave oven with those microwave towers. Get it? Got it? So Watkins suggested, and immediately the private leapt ferociously at the officer, grabbed him by the throat. In his waking state, the private would have been aghast at the thought of trying to strangle a superior officer. But under hypnosis, believing the officer was a dangerous Japanese soldier, the young private had to be pulled off his superior by 3 husky assistants. The officer came within a hair's breadth of being strangled, as the young man was most persistent in his attempt to kill what he regarded as the enemy. So what kind of ferociousness are we all capable of if we're hypnotized? And apparently 90% of the people are susceptible, even if it takes a little drug inducement. But once they hypnotize you one time, later on all they have to do is use trigger words to put you back into a trance state, or fulfill some kind of programmed mission, which could be an assassin. Watkins repeated this experiment with other subjects. The second time he used 2 officers who were good friends. So these 2 officers are good friends. One of them was given the hypnotic suggestion that the other was a Japanese soldier and that he must kill or be killed. The man who had received the command not only made a powerful lunge at his friend, but as he did, he whipped out and opened a concealed jackknife, which neither the doctor or his assistants nor his friend knew he had. Oh boy. Only the quick action of one of the assistants who was a judo expert, prevented a potentially fatal stabbing. So when I was reading this, I was thinking, we got all these school shooters, movie theater shooters, who look like they're in trances if you've seen some pictures of these people. Boston bombing people, and so many others, airplane bombers, shoe bombers, railroad train bombers. In both cases, reality was so distorted that the subjects took murderous and antisocial action. Well, so much that people can't be made to do things they wouldn't normally do. If they had accomplished their defensive acts, both men could have been convicted of murder, since the law did not recognize motivation through hypnosis as a fact. So the courts don't recognize hypnosis as a fact. So if you are hypnotized and you commit the crime, you're going to prison, maybe the gas chamber, if they hypnotize you and you commit the crime. The courts, in all but a few cases, have adopted the traditional scientific view that criminal behavior cannot be induced under hypnosis. That view still stands today. Well, this was 1947, I said. But I don't think they would probably allow that argument in court these days. To test the premise, which was then widely held, that a normal person under hypnotic trance could not be made to divulge information which would be self-incriminating, Watkins conducted a number of experiments where a monetary bribe was offered to withhold information. Watkins discovered that when placed in a trance, they spilled every time, either verbally or in writing. So people were paid money not to divulge something if they had to go to court. They were paid. They were intentionally not going to tell. They were going to keep it a secret. But when they were put in a trance, they told everything. The subject of one of these experiments was an enlisted WAC in military intelligence. Her commanding officer ordered her not to reveal a list of what were made to appear. Next page. To be real military secrets. Under hypnosis, she spilled everything. So who would be doing this? What are they trying to do? Where are they? What do they want? I was looking at my Nexus magazines, so I thought I'd look at a couple covers of some of the things I've read about over the years. The transnational ruling class exposed. Transnational ruling class. There's another name for that called the International Jew, according to Henry Ford, the automaker, in his books that I've shown, or countries all over the world calling the situation a Jewish problem. And who is behind this? And it's not all Jewish people. Apparently Jewish people are into the Kabbalah, some mystery religion, which have been called sorcery or witchcraft. And a lot of Jews are anti-Zionist Jews and have written many books trying to warn the rest of us. A lot of Jews are God-fearing people. Some of them could be atheists, not believing in anything, but they're not part of the problem. But there is a transnational ruling class exposed. I've gone over the book by Robert Williams, The Ultimate World Order, because he found a book in a library in Texas called The Jewish Utopia, The Protocols of Zion, And I've made a lot of books on these particular peoples, and that they don't have to be Jewish. You don't have to be Jewish to be a witch, or to be greedy, or a perverted, decadent monster, murderer. But apparently there are some certain peoples, and David Icke says that the people in Israel are being used by reptilian entities. And what is a reptilian? It's a serpent. And who gave Eve the apple in the Garden of Eden but a serpent? So you might be able to put together some clues what we're talking about. So it could be a lot of Jewish people into this mystery religion, into the Kabbalah, into alchemy. And the mystery religion might be satanic worship, with beings, spiritual entities, who apparently are able to manifest themselves in our reality, and have been here all along, maybe. And they're trying to mind control us, making us believe it's different kinds of aliens with their spaceships coming to visit us from other planets. The Third Reich's space race, the transnational ruling class. Iran and World War III back in 2010. This stuff's been going on for a while. Mind control. People are reading these articles, newspapers, press releases. ClimateGate chills man-made global warming theory. The hidden history of World War II. Why did we have World War II? Was it because the Zionist Jewish people failed to get the Palestinians' property to create the State of Israel during World War I with the Balfour Agreement? What are we to believe? The global agenda behind the Arab uprisings. So I think a lot of people will agree there are these hidden forces behind the scenes that have brought us all these uprisings in the Arab countries, where they dragged their presidents through the streets or killed them. Even the Ukraine, I guess to punish Russia because it wasn't going along with the destructions of Syria. Mind control. What are we to believe? Project Censored top stories. Whenever I get these Nexus magazine, I like to read these censored articles. Things that are very important, but the media did not want to put it in the news. Al Jazeera and the Arab Spring myth. There was no revolution in the Arab countries. Those were hired mercenaries, paid killers, assassins. Rand Corporation and a UFO think tank. We're going to hear about Rand Corporation in this mind control book I'm reading. Implantable microchips and the New World Order agenda. So some people, maybe Nexus magazine, are trying to warn people of what's going on. The secret agenda to weaponize space. Vaccines, lies, and statistics. Ancient texts reveal alien intervention in our history. Mind control or truth? Deception or truth? WikiLeaks, a new global awakening. Secret societies and international terrorism. You can go online and get these back orders of Nexus magazines, or I think for $140 you can buy a disc with every magazine article in it since the first Nexus magazine, 20 years, whatever. The human microchip agenda. Inducing ESP with self-hypnosis. So a lot of interesting articles in these magazines. That was I don't see a date on this one. Swine flu outbreak, pandemic, and profit. So they're making money on these biological outbreaks. Ebola, swine flu, bird flu. Hidden dangers of vaccinations. Blood transfusions, what you need to know. Financial New World Order towards a global currency. So it doesn't take a genius to start looking at some of these titles and say, they have a plan. What kind of weapons do they have? Do they have mind control technologies? Are they using it? Educational mind control. Weaponized hypnosis, drug-induced mind control. And there's other types. America's looming collapse. June 2009. Global financial crisis, death of an empire. Can you see how this might be some kind of mind control? All that propaganda out there? People falling for it, becoming preppers? Is somebody behind all this? Probably laughing all the way to the bank. 25 censored news stories, 2007-2008. Global financial crisis, February 2009. Self-aware armed drones flying in a sky near you. So artificial intelligence software program. Monitoring everything you do. A drone flying through the air. The software determines that you are an enemy. And the decision has been made to bring about martial law or get rid of certain people who might be getting in the way of their agenda. And the drone flies over your house. Maybe drops a bomb. Maybe crashes into your house. Just saying. Self-aware armed drones. China to disclose UFO secrets. Death rays, a hidden technology. Death rays, a hidden technology. You can look up on the internet and see they have airplanes and large ships with laser beams on them, even huge airplanes, so they can fly or in the sky or from a ship and fire off a huge laser beam. And also with the HARP transmitter, they put a huge beam of energy off the ionosphere and bounce it anywhere they want, which apparently can emit certain frequencies and make people feel like they're burning up or even fry their brains and go crazy or induce hostile, riotous behavior. Just saying. The Return of Planet X, interview with Zachariah Stitchens, Project Censored 25 Top Stories, January 2011. So I've been reading these magazines every year. You can go to your local bookstore, get a current edition. They put them out every 2 months. I don't get any money from this. I'm not connected with them in any way. Martial law and bailouts and war. Climate change debate. Secret technology of the Third Reich. CIA whistleblower on UFOs and ETs. How much of this is part of mind control? What's the truth? RFID chip surveillance, your every moved track. The coming ice age, December 2008. So we weren't having global warming in this magazine back then. It was a coming ice age. Covert weapons for social control. June 2007. I started my research in 2005. This was just one of the sources I was reading material, and then I would read these articles and I didn't believe them, and I would go on the internet or go to the bookstore and find more information on these topics. I've made many videos in my documentary series, Freemasonry and Satanism. This is series 211. Yesterday I did it on the galactic diplomacy. Apparently the governments supposedly are negotiating treaties with the aliens, and the Nordics were turned down, and the second aliens, the Greys, were given a treaty. Apparently they were allowed to abduct people and locate themselves on Earth, create hybrid creatures in exchange for giving our governmental powers, the people behind the scenes, new advanced technologies. Go look it up. Truman, Eisenhower, UFO, aliens, those are some keywords. Project Montauk, MK Ultra, Area 51, gray aliens, reptilian aliens. Listen to some of the channelers channeling some kind of entities. Nancy Leader channeling the Zetas. Barbara Marciniak channeling the Palladians. So many others. People are following this information, and I've been listening to some of it. And I'm noticing some common denominators. And they're saying, don't believe in the old ways. The old ways are no longer useful. And if your friends, your spouse, your children are not agreeing with your new vision of reality, let them go away. You don't need them. Worry about yourself. Manifest your reality. Go watch that stuff and see if I'm not right. Christianity is outdated. It's no longer needed. You can do anything you want. There are no rules, no commandments, no such thing as sin. Is this mind control? Covert weapons for social control. Covert weapons for social control. June 2007. What do we have here? The intelligent ether. Is the ether, the air around me, is it intelligent? Is the earth alive? Is it a living entity? Astronauts, UFO sightings, project censored, most unreported stories. Project censored, most unreported stories. Things they didn't want you to know. Nexus magazine tells you things you should know. So it says. Alright, so where did I leave off? Alright, so under hypnosis I was talking about that one experiment where this whack female military person was told not to divulge the secrets. Under hypnosis, she spilled everything. This is page 64. Another experiment was discontinued when it was discovered that a research worker in the government arsenal was spilling vital and top secret war information to the friendly army hypnotists who did not have a need to know. He did this loud and clear while in a trance before an audience of 200 military professionals. If the subject had been allowed to continue, the disclosures of information would have resulted in a general court-martial, no matter how the doctor might have tried to persuade intelligence headquarters that this was just a test. Much of the Army's experimentation with manipulation by hypnosis was inspired by the reports of Wesley Raymond Wells, a doctor at Syracuse University. Wells' research, in turn, had been inspired by the fiction of the 1880s and 1890s, which described criminal acts as being induced by hypnosis. Wells was taken by the idea that the most striking feature of the hypnosis subject in his automatisms Wells was taken by the idea that the most striking feature in hypnotized subjects is his automatisms. Although earlier experiments had elicited no immoral or criminal behavior from subjects under hypnosis, the results of experiments when asked subjects to resist various suggestions indicated to Wells that people might be more suggestible than was generally believed. In the late 1930s, Wells conducted a simple experiment with a student volunteer. He chose a subject who had stated that he expected he would be below average and hypnotizable, and claimed he could not be put into a trance. Before inducing trance, Wells urged him to do his utmost to resist in every possible way, first going into the trance and then doing anything against his own moral code. When the student told Wells that he was ready to begin the contest, the doctor put his hand on the student's chest, counted to 7, and found that the subject had already fallen into a deep trance. Some people have this mesmerizing ability. What if sinister people have a mesmerizing ability? After testing the subject's muscle control and ability to attain amnesia and hallucinations, Wells proceeded to suggest that the subject get up from his chair, go over to Wells' overcoat, which was on the coat rack across the room, and take out $1 from the right-hand pocket. Wells suggested that the subject see the coat as his own, take the $1 thinking that he had left it in the pocket. When the subject followed all of Wells' suggestions, he was then told to put the $1 in his own breast pocket, return to his chair, and as he was about to sit, Wells said to him that when he sat in the chair he would remember only that he had an extra $1 when he came into the office, and later he would spend the $1 just as if it was his own. Afterwards, during the student's recall of his experiences, Wells found that everything had worked according to the hypnotic program he had implanted. This was, of course, a clinical sort of test for amnesia. Whether his amnesia would have withstood third-degree methods of the police or a lie detector methods of a psychological laboratory is another question. Wells said, on the basis of my previous experimental study of post-hypnotic amnesia, I would state that it is my opinion that hypnotically induced amnesia in the case of so good a subject would have withstood any possible test, or at least it might have been made to withstand any possible test if added precautions had been taken in the hypnotic production of the amnesia. So if they gave the guy a serious enough program under the influence of the trance, being hypnotized, he probably would resist any persecution or interrogation, and maybe even somebody else trying to hypnotize him. He would not divulge what he had been hypnotized to keep secret. Wells' reports of this experiment, published in a psychological journal in 1941, brought a negative reaction from the scientific community. Milton Erickson was among the first to say that Wells' experiments were at best inconclusive. Erickson reported that after attempting to duplicate similar hypnotic inducements of crime within 50 subjects, he had failed. So this other doctor said because he couldn't do it, the other guy couldn't do it either. And I've said all along that certain people have greater mesmeric abilities, hypnotic abilities to hypnotize people. Some people can put people in a trance rather quickly, almost without effort. And there's magicians and shows you can go see where magicians do that to the audience. He concluded from his own investigations that hypnotism cannot be misused to induce hypnotized persons to commit actual wrongful acts, either against themselves or others. The so-called antisocial acts induced by Wells and others, Erickson maintained, were most likely motivated by factors other than hypnotism or suggestion. We know that it is possible, without recourse to hypnotism, for one person to induce another to commit a wrong, a fact we may explain loosely as an influence of one person upon another. So obviously, you get a couple young boys, and one boy suggests they go steal something, and the other person probably can be talked into it if he wants to be cool or take some drugs. Erickson explained, to settle this question is difficult, since it involves three inseparable factors of unknown potentialities, specifically the hypnotist as a person, the subject as a person, and hypnotism as such, to say nothing of the significant influence upon these three, both individually, collectively, of the suggestion and the performance of the questionable act. So I wrote down some key words here that I thought about when I was reading this, but apparently we are experiencing worldwide something called social conditioning. More people are becoming more anti-Christian, even calling Christians haters. More people are saying, haven't you heard Jesus Christ was just a myth? I've had this conversation with people recently, and they've shown me videos or documents that say it, and they believe it. Social conditioning is taking place. The Los Angeles, apparently I talked about this in a previous video on a document I was looking at, apparently they're trying to pass a new law that people cannot say negative things about homosexuality. So you as a person, if you were to tell somebody that you think it's wrong for homosexuality and they shouldn't engage in it, you might be committing a crime in the near future, and that philosophy and legal system may expand all over the country, maybe all over the world. Everything is changing. Social conditioning. Is that another form of mind control? Like I said, you can go online and probably find this PDF book, Operation Mind Control. Walter Bowart. I found it free PDF. I tried to buy it. It is fascinating, and this is just one part of one chapter, just a couple pages. You don't get very far in a 2-hour video. And I'm going to continue reading the entire book. It's just fascinating, and there are many different examples, including you can go look up MK Ultra. He does mention MK Ultrian in this book, or Miles Johnston in the Basis series, or Illuminati whistleblowers, Freemason Masonic whistleblowers, Church of Satan whistleblowers, insiders in the government and huge corporation whistleblowers, and a lot of them have been assassinated and killed or imprisoned or discredited and ruined. We are apparently, clearly, according to a video I was watching this morning by a guy dying in a hospital who worked for the government, he says clearly we are under attack. And one of their weapons is mind control, and there are many facets of mind control. It can be very subtle. Education, 911, the people going along to overthrow and destroy all those countries in the Middle East. How horrific it is for those people. Most of them probably had nothing to do with anything evil in their lives, but they were in the way. Israel had plans for a greater Israel. The people had to go. You can go look up Greater Israel. So you can undo your mind control and stop believing in the lies and deception and propaganda. You can wake up. And it's important we wake up and we share the information with other people. Because obviously they're not going to stop where they are. And then other material I've gone over, even with YouTube recently, out of 500 plus videos on YouTube, removing one and giving me one strike, 2 more strikes, my channel gets deleted. And it was World Revolution, the plot against civilization. Don't you think that tells a tale? Tells us what's going on? And then 2 other videos of mine, they put serious restrictions on. People can't watch them without getting a warning message first, which they have to approve. They're not allowed to put thumbs up or thumbs down or make comments. And that was on Bloody Zion and racial Zionism. I had to move. It was starting to sprinkle out. So back to the book. You know, when you think about the 500 plus videos I have on YouTube, now I've got a couple videos on real.video, and I'm working to expand what I'm doing. And you see all the other millions of videos on YouTube and other websites and books and magazines. There's plenty of evidence to support. There are some mysterious, sinister forces operating behind the scenes. So if you look at a list of my videos on rickmiracle.com, top left hand side, you can cut and paste, and just see the different topics that my investigation has led me to, and try to connect the dots on how they're all connected, which I believe they are all connected. The UFO alien thing, World War I, World War II, Freemasons, Rosicrucian, Kabbalah, Zionism, Satanism, Lucifer, Helena Blavatsky, Theophist Society, and predicted World War III, revolutions. We've all seen a very interesting history in the last few hundred years. But most people are myopic. They only see the small portion of what they want to see. So back to the book. When in a hallucinatory state has been induced and a subject thinks he or she is acting out of self-preservation, the primitive mind takes over and the killer instinct is unleashed. In the late 1930s, psychologists began grappling with the problem of human will, as the theologians before them had done for centuries. Human will. Some maintained that will meant conscious violation, others that it meant nothing but the manifestation of the belief system. That is to say, the result of the earliest conditioned response. The area of will still lies outside the limits of modern psychology. Many experts are loath even to use the word will, since it represents a most ill-defined dimension of human nature. So I've done some study on human will, and apparently we have 2 components to us, each of us: our mental will, our propensity to be a nice guy or a bad guy. And we all know people who are just naturally bad guys, and we know people who are maybe even pathetically nice. And some people are in the middle. Will. But then there's also, in my opinion, according to my research on the psychic ability and metaphysics, there's the soul of a person, which has a negative nature or a positive nature. So a person's soul or spiritual essence can have a negative nature or a positive nature. So assuming somebody is Christian and believes in Jesus and calls on the Holy Ghost and wants Jesus Christ in their lives, then their spiritual essence obviously would probably be positive, beneficial to humankind, if they were sincere. A lot of people call themselves Christians, but are not, of course. But then if some people were into witchcraft and pedophilia and child sacrifice and worshiping satanic entities, then their will would be negative, but they feel, these people with the New Age teaching the dualism, that that's okay to have a negative will. Gut, I call it a gut. And a positive and negative will, the biological human computer self, or the spiritual essence. So a lot of times when I use a pendulum and I see a picture of somebody, I learned this when I learned how to do dowsing. I can put the pendulum over the picture and it'll tell me like positive or negative, or positive will or negative will. And a lot of people that I check out, when I check out the spiritual self, the gut, the lower self they call it, or the higher self, it shows negative or positive. And in some cases it does a figure 8, a pendulum, just something FYI. And I've discovered the figure 8 means that individual is possessed. So it makes you wonder what happens to a possessed individual when they're hypnotized. Or a person who is negatively inclined, has an evil heart to the extreme, or has a very benevolent heart to the extreme. Most people are probably in the middle somewhere. And then the spiritual essence also, most people are probably in the middle. Some people are just way over to the positive extreme, Jesus probably. And then of course the negative would be the Satanists, Satan, Lucifer, demonology would be all the way to the left. So most people are in the middle on both of those. But it was interesting for me to discover some people didn't have a left or a right spiritual essence. The pendulum gyrated. And I discovered that meant they had a different soul in their body. They were actually possessed. So in psychology, these kinds of concerns apparently are there. Okay. But most experts are loath even to use the word will, since it represents a most ill-defined dimension of human nature. I hope I clarified that a little bit. Summing up a carefully constructed semantic argument, psychologists often say, a person cannot be made to do anything against his will or basic moral precepts. Now I'm thinking about that, and I'm thinking about what people are taught, since when I grew up, I grew up sort of in the latter part of the hippie era, and you know, sitting at the bus stop waiting for the bus, and people were smoking marijuana, and people were skipping school and buying Boone's Farm and listening to rock and roll. It was an interesting time to grow up. So what I'm trying to say is human nature is changing. Morality, the perception of it is changing. And that's interesting. So how far will it change to the negative or the positive, away from God and more towards anything goes? And how will that work in favor of the people bringing us a global world order or new world order, new age, involving technologies and mind control, subtle or drugs and induced hypnotism, maybe even using electronic technologies? So morality, norms are changing. So it's mentioning in here a person is more susceptible depending on his moral precepts, and it's certainly changing more for the free will. That statement taken at face value is certainly true. A normal person would not willingly kill a friend. And I know the powers that be have been working feverishly to get soldiers to be willing killers. They had a big problem with that in World War I and World War II. A lot of Germans were reluctant to kill the British, and a lot of British were reluctant to kill the Germans. They would just poke their head up and fire some shots at the enemy. So a normal person would not willingly kill a friend, but if he was made to hallucinate that his friend was an enemy, and it was a kill or be killed situation, he would initiate a natural response to preserve his own life. And if you talk to people now about homosexuality or a bunch of other issues, even believing in Jesus and all that, people will visibly get vicious about it and say that's evil, you're crazy, you're behind times. Or if you're a Republican and you try to talk to a Democrat, they get vicious. If you're a Democrat and you're Republican trying to talk to a Democrat, or a Democrat trying to talk to a Republican, I've done it. I'm kind of an independent. And people get vicious. They're set in their ways. So they would probably use that knowledge, metadata based on the computer systems, artificial intelligence, and maybe be able to give people different kinds of programming depending upon their perception of reality. In the process, he might even take an imagined enemy's life. After the hallucination passed, he would realize he had killed his friend. The criminal act would be considered, in one sense, an act of will, but the real cause of the action would not be understood outside the hallucinated state. Only the killer's grief would remain to attest to his knowledge of what he did, and that he really did not want to do it. So it does make you wonder about some of these people who look like they're under hypnotism or drugs, who have been accused of mass school shootings, etc. They certainly don't look normal, and apparently some of them it has been reported, were seeing therapists or psychologists for different issues. So you just wonder how much all this is stage and government testing of these hypnosis weapons, maybe. Just saying, or tools to make a social change. Whether or not hypnosis can be used to deeply motivate to commit antisocial acts, despite the call to their own conscience, is still an open question in academic circles. And I thought about that, these days when you buy some marijuana. A friend of mine, when I was out at a nightclub the other night, said he had some really good marijuana. And I asked him, I said, do you know what they might have put in it? What kind of chemical could they put in the marijuana? Is it regular marijuana? Homegrown, organic, good stuff? Or is it tainted and laced with some kind of acid or something? These are concerns people need to think about. People probably are not even aware of that. And, what could they use that to weaponize that someday in the future? Just unleash a massive amount of drugs on the market, even marijuana tainted with chemicals, and cause people to go easily under hypnosis via artificial intelligence, soundless transmissions with voices you hear in your head, telling you what to do, putting you in a hypnotic trance. Just theorizing here, but it seems to be kind of close to what is happening. George Estabrook had evidence which made him conclude that one in 5 of the human race are highly suggestible. So this George Estabrook says 1 in every 5 of the human race are highly suggestible. At least half are suggestible to a very considerable degree. And he warned, mere figures do not tell the story, that 1/5 has a power far beyond its numbers. For this type of man, acting under direct suggestion, is no mere average person. He is a fanatic with all the fanaticisms may imply for good or evil. Can this prospective subject, this 1 in 5 individual, be hypnotized against his will? So just think about it. They do get somebody who's a strong Christian, and they're made to believe that all these liberal, progressives, pansexual, transgenderism people are of the devil. And they're triggered, programmed, and they take it easily because they believe. Conversely, these people trying to bring about a global world order and possibly a depopulation event, World War III, chaos and anarchy, as President George Bush Sr. said would be required to bring about a new world order. So the people who are more liberal, progressive, they would have their programming thinking that the Christians are actually the demons and they're hated. So people could receive different programming, viciously wanting to go after the other party. Just saying. What do you think the technologies being unleashed these days have to do with all of this? Anything? Everything? The answer to this very vital question, Esther Brooks concluded, is yes, though we prefer to say without his consent instead against his will. We do not need the subject's consent when we wish to hypnotize him, for we used disguised techniques. So they hypnotize people with disguised techniques. I wonder if they get into the classrooms and even with the microwave children, which is documented, ongoing program since 2013 I'm aware of in California, Texas. Then I found out in a restaurant with my friends that's going on in Florida, so I suspect it's all over the world. Can those chips have any thing to do with a person being susceptible to being hypnotized, emitting or receiving transmitted frequencies? I would say probably yes. Believing in Esther Brooks' logic, pragmatists in the government began to explore the possibilities of ways to change belief and motivate behavior. They let scores of contracts for research into hypnosis, behavior modification, conditioning, and virtually anything that held an even slim chance of being able to give them control over the individual human mind and will. So they've been working on this for quite a while. And my perception is, after living 60 years, is they got a functioning, working system in place. And they're getting ready to turn it on. If they're not already testing it, as a lot of people are saying, especially the directed energy weapons and HARP systems and wildfires and chemical spraying, biological weapons. These are facts. They're testing these. Meanwhile, foreign government, unfriendly to the United States, foreign governments, were involved in similar psychological research. And I'm still convinced that behind all the governments in the world by this time, there is a mysterious crypto power government, whatever you want to call it, crassy, controlling things. And it certainly does seem to have something to do with satanic beings, biblical prophecies. And I believe they're bringing us the UFO alien subject as a disguise or a cover-up. It's a huge deception. But the U.S. government's fear of losing superiority in this new and untested field ran away with them. Intelligence analysts believed a mind control gap existed, and to close it, they mobilized think tanks to develop a usable program of experimental research at once. So this book was written in 1978, and a lot of people are now aware of Project Montauk, Army base at the end of Long Island, with a SAGE antenna they were using to scan the oceans for the enemy. And they found out that when they turned on that antenna, it made animals go crazy, even run into the towns, and people to get emotionally irritant and do other crazy things. So they discovered that the SAGE radar antenna systems could change the emotions in humans. Think about this. Combine that with hypnotism and other mind control weaponry, you can forcefully make people get agitated, and you just have to set the stage with a couple other issues, demonizing the Arabs like in 9/11, and everybody will willingly go along with a mass slaughter of other humans, or maybe kill each other's. Christians and conservatives and social value families believing in normalcy, killing the people who believe in no normalcy, pansexual, transgender, homosexual, Satanism, no religion, anti-Christian. Oh my, the stage is set. From one think tank, RAND Corporation, they're involved in a lot of these things for the government, intelligent people, seriously intelligent people, educated men and women, spending their lives trying to work for the government to take over the control and kind of mind control all of we the people and keep a lot of things from us and do things to us. Even experimentation with humans and children and all that. For one think tank, the RAND Corporation, please go look up RAND Corporation, R-A-N-D, came a report entitled, "Are the Coming Form Countries Using Hypnosis Techniques to Elicit Confessions in Public Trials?" Dated April 25, 1949. It helped set the stage for using national security as a rationale for resorting to mind control to motivate criminal acts both at home and abroad. The successful use of hypnosis, the report says, would represent a serious threat to democratic values in times of peace and war. In addition, it might contribute to the development of unconventional methods of warfare, which will be widely regarded as immoral. People don't realize how many people have been murdered in the Middle East and other countries, Africa, South America, and probably it's ongoing right now, and a lot of people are apathetic and they don't care. What does it say about those people who just don't want to care? Spiritually, what about their soul growth when they leave this planet? How far will they get not trying to get involved and stop the atrocities? And being apathetic or ignorant of what's going on when it's happening right in front of their faces. Just makes you wonder. Why do some people wake up like 15% and 85% do not want to know? The results of scientific research in the field under discussion would obviously lend themselves to offensive as well as defensive applications, and to abuse no less than to use. To abuse no less than to use. It must be assumed that almost all the scientific personnel in the field of hypnosis are keenly aware of the social implications of their work, and that they are interested in limiting the practice of hypnosis to therapeutic applications. So you take somebody with a negative will or a negative spiritual essence, even somebody into witchcraft, they learn how to use hypnosis. Oh my, what will they do? That assumption proved to be untrue. The RAND report recommended that these moral and political implications of experimental research on hypnosis be explored as fully as possible prior to the official encouragement and sponsorship of such research, so as to establish the most effective safeguards against its unintended consequences. Oh my. I guess you can see why I thought this book was worth obtaining and making a video on. It is an interesting topic, and it certainly does seem like there is some social conditioning going on, and a battle for globalism, and by some certain elites, like with Donald Trump recognizing Jerusalem, saying the U.S. recognizes Jerusalem as a capital, which is a huge biblical event about the return of the Jewish people from its diaspora of 2,000 years. In prophecy, it talks about the return in Armageddon. Just saying, being aware is probably a good idea. Back to this book, page 68. I've got about 15 minutes to go. The RAND study dwelt at length upon Soviet experiments in hypnosis dating back to 1923. At the State Institute of Experimental Psychology in Moscow, the report stated it was demonstrated that hypnosis could be used in inducing an innocent person to develop intense guilt feelings and to confess to a criminal or an immoral act which he did not commit. So they can make people confess to things they didn't do. They can make people believe they actually did them. That's concerning. In 1932, the experiments on hypnotically implanted crimes were reported in English translation by the A.R. Luria, who at that time was a professor in the Academy of Communist Education. So the communists were created when the Bolshevik Jews invaded Russia. Bolshevik Jewish people. And they are into these hypnotism and mind control programs. And according to Prime Minister Sharon of Israel, Israel controls America, and America knows it. You can go look that up. Go look up what Benjamin Netanyahu said in Fink's Bar if you want to be made upset and angry. And so many other quotes by these people. I made a video on that on my live streaming. And I need to continue looking at that documentation. Quoting Luria, the report described how hypnosis was used as a device for producing emotional disturbances in order to control behavior. We suggested to the person under test, while in a sufficiently deep hypnotic state, a certain situation, more often a disagreeable one, in which he was playing a role irreconcilable with his habits and contrary to his usual beliefs. And just think of all the situations we're in right now. If they were to pull the plug on the economy, what would people do? How susceptible would they be to trances or hearing voices or drugs put into the water? Probably wouldn't take much to make haters out of all people hating each other. We thus obtained an actual and rather sharply expressed acute effect. After awakening the person under test, we had a subject who was loaded with certain definite affective complexes, which mostly remained unknown to himself. Luria described an experiment with a 20-year-old female college student who was told under deep hypnosis that she was sitting in her room studying when a neighbor child, a boy of 6, came into the room. She was told that the child shouted when he came into the room and disturbed her studies. Now she's under hypnosis. This did not really happen. And she's told in her hypnotic state, she asked him to stop, but he did not listen. The young woman was then told that she would get angry and forget herself. She would take a stick and beat the boy, first on the back and then on the head. The boy would cry out from the wounds on his head, but she would keep on beating him. She would then feel very ashamed and would be unable to understand how such a thing could happen, how she could beat up a child. Finally, she was told that she must try to forget the incident altogether. Luria explained that he had chosen this situation with a definite purpose. Since the hallucinated event, she really didn't beat the child. The child really didn't go into her room, but she was hypnotized and told this happened. Since the hallucinated event was entirely unacceptable by the moral standards of the young woman's personality, it was natural that she would feel repentant. He reinforced her natural desire to forget by suggesting to her that she remove the memory of the event from her mind. In subsequent trances, the subject was questioned about the beating. With great difficulty, she reconstructed the event, but shifted the emphasis on several points so that the imagined event would conform more to her basic moral code. Are they messing with our minds? What about cartoons? You think they can hypnotize young children, influence them, program them? while mommy and daddy are out of the room. And probably if you were watching the cartoon yourself, you probably wouldn't even notice some of the mesmerizing effects. What about some of the Emmys and Grammys and Super Bowl halftime shows? Some of those satanic rituals with Madonna, Beyonce, Katy Perry, Lady Gaga. It's quite bizarre with the music and the lights. You think they're doing any kind of mass hypnotic and programming going on? And other kinds of symbols? At first she refused to remember that she had beaten the child. She then concluded that she had pulled his ears. Then finally she admitted she had beaten him, but she maintained she was not beating him with a stick. Gloria said that this showed how unacceptable the situation was to her personality. The student said twice, "My conscience has tortured me." Laura said this showed the effectiveness of hypnotic suggestion. Wow, she's put in a traumatic state for beating the boy that she never really beat. Think of the possibilities here. Of the experiment, Irving Janis, author of Rand Report, observed, in this particular case, the implanted memory was initially referred to by the examiner as a dream rather than a real event. But from the detailed reports of the other investigation, this procedure does not appear to be necessary for eliciting a false confession. A hypnotized subject will often accept and confess to an implanted memory as a real event in his own past lives. Makes you wonder about these school shooters and bombers and other people. Are they patsies? They were seeing psychologists. What kind of sinister forces are at work in our reality right now? The Rand Report itself suggested that this trick of hypnotic suggestion might be used on a defendant awaiting trial. The defendant would be prepared in a series of hypnotic sessions to accept guilt about a criminal act he did not commit. And then, if placed in a hypnotic trance while in the courtroom, the prosecutor's interrogation would elicit a false confession. So there are evil forces at play in our world, and apparently they are setting up people they want to discredit or ruin. Fearing the communist use of hypnosis, the Rand Report warned that hypnosis, once accomplished, is hard to detect. Contrary to reports in the 19th century, a hypnotized subject is not blindly obedient, nor does he act like an automaton when in trance. Hypnotic suggestions are acted out and elaborated in a way that is consistent with the individual's habitual behavior. Sorry about that. The phone ringeth. Let me read that sentence again. We suggested to the person under test, while in a sufficiently deep hypnotic state, a certain situation, more often a disagreeable one, in which he was playing a role irreconcilable with his habits and contrary to his usual behavior. We thus obtained an actual and rather sharply expressed acute effect. After awakening the person under test, we had a subject who was loaded with certain definite affected complexes, which mostly remained unknown to himself. Oh my! I think I'll just jump ahead and read something I highlighted. To induce hypnosis in an unwilling subject, the report suggested any of three possibilities, which were then well supported by research findings. So you can see I highlighted a lot and made some notes on this page. So there have three possibilities about people who are unwilling subjects on how to hypnotize them. 1. As part of a medical examination, talk relaxation to the subject, thus disguising the hypnotic induction. So they talk smoothly and calmly to the person at a medical examination, and the person doesn't even know they're being hypnotized. For example, the person might be given a blood pressure test and told that he must relax completely in order to give an adequate test record, and then be given suggestions to go to sleep, which would result in a hypnotic trance. Would they do that? Number 2, induce hypnosis while the person is actually asleep from normal fatigue. This could be done by simply talking softly into the sleeper's ear. So using electromagnetic transmissions where they can put voices in your head, would they be able to do this to people while they're sleeping and put them in a trance and program them? Just thinking. And of course, number 3, using injections of drugs to induce hypnosis. The hypnotic drugs would relax the subject and put him in a twilight state where the subconscious mind is very susceptible to suggestion. This is 1978 material. They've certainly advanced hugely since then. So soundless electromagnetic waves, hearing voices, knowing they have these drugs and these technologies. And they've been working with RAND Corporation and other corporations behind the scenes to perfect these skills. And they have an aim for a global world order. And there's a lot of visible things we can see going on in the world that many people will admit. Things are going on that just seem crazy. Talk to people. Just bizarre. And then you read about stuff like this. Subjects who refuse to resist the simple talking method of hypnotic induction could be given a few grams of peridide or an intravenous injection of sodium pentothal or sodium amytal. The appropriate dosage of those drugs invariably induces a state of light hypnotic sleep. During the sleep, the subject would be given suggestions which would produce the characteristic deep hypnotic trance. While in the first drug-induced trance, the patient could be given post-hypnotic suggestions to the effect that he would be susceptible to hypnosis thereafter without the use of drugs. So they administer some kind of drug to a person. When they hypnotize him, they'll make him easier to hypnotize again, put in a trance. And then when they bring him out of it, they'll also tell him to forget that he'd ever been under a trance. He's programmed and ready to go. Subsequently, the subject could be allowed to practice carrying out post-hypnotic suggestions. He could then be rehypnotized, still without his conscious cooperation, but this time without the use of drugs. So once they get somebody under the first time, apparently they got him. The report admitted that at the time of this writing, there were no certain knowledge of just how successful each of the 3 methods described might prove to be with individuals who are on their guard against being victimized by hostile authorities. The drug techniques, suggested the report, would probably turn out to be the simplest and most efficient of the 3, so that it would be the most likely candidate for hypnotizing defendants against their will. And I'm here to tell you now, with the electromagnetic transmissions and wireless systems and what they know about psychic capabilities, they probably can implant programs or voices and make people believe things are happening that are really not happening. Or, like with the sage antenna at the end of Montauk, the frequencies would make them agitated, as well as probably the right frequencies would make people calm, maybe even make them calm in situations that were disastrous when they should be on their guard. lethargic maybe, apathetic, zombies. We've been hearing that term a lot. Another important use of hypnotism for the government, the report said, would be the induction of amnesia. Once a deep hypnotic trance is achieved, it is possible to introduce post-hypnotic amnesia so that a subject would not know that he had been subjected to hypnosis, to drugs, or any other treatment. The report then turned to the problem of producing the deep hypnotic trance essential to post-hypnotic amnesia. It stated that based on research, reports at that time, about 90% of any unsuspected population, it should be possible to produce the deepest somnambulistic, while you're sleeping, type of trance. According to numerous authorities, a light trance is sufficient to elicit a confession of actual misbehavior which might otherwise be withheld, but for carrying out complete post-hypnotic amnesia, it is a somnambulistic trance that is required when you're sleeping. Wow, the RAND document expressed fear that Soviet investigators had found other techniques which could produce deep hypnosis in perhaps 90% or more of all individuals. FYI, stuff you need to know. The technologies are out there, and there are crazy things happening, and there are serious intentions for this global world order. And they can target the people who are leaning towards the right. Christians, family values, conservatives. They don't have to be Christian. They could be Buddhist, Hindu, Islamic. And they can target the people who are more propensity towards decadency and believe that they can do whatever they want. Group sex, pansexualism, transgenderism, homosexualism, and are even passing legislation. You can't talk about these things. And even me, in one of my educational courses I took recently for my business, did you know that transgenderism and those kinds of people are now a protected class? I mean, I wouldn't discriminate against anybody anyways, but they're making these things law, like even with me renewing my driver's license here in North Carolina. They're trying to force everybody to submit additional applications and get a federal driver's license approved. I suppose if you don't have a federal driver's license, you won't even be able to drive from state to state. Never mind get on a plane or a bus or a train. We're living in some very interesting times. So thank you for watching my video. Rick Miracle reporting.